First and foremost, thank you all for being here this morning, taking the time to come in and listen to our session. We have a great panel for you today. My name is Rob Patrick, and I lead Waymo's first responder outreach team. So a little bit about me. I came to Waymo in April of 2021 after 32 years with the California Highway Patrol, where I retired as commander of our Special Operations Unit, where I had responsibility for the multidisciplinary accident investigation teams, aviation branch, investigative branch, a lot of different things. Interesting story, I said when I retired from the patrol after 32 years, I would never go back to work again. I was going to camp and fish and do a lot of fun things. Did that for about a year and figured out that you can only play so much bad golf anyway. One day I got a call from a company called Waymo, and they said, hey, we're an AV technology company, and we'd like to build a team that works specifically with first responders on AV interaction. And we think you'd be the right person to put this team together. It was a super opportunity. I mean, AVs have so much promise for safety on our roadways, and it was a great opportunity to come back to the world I knew for 30 plus years and talk to people about this great new technology, help first responders understand how to work with the tech. So, my wife wanted me to get out of the house anyway, so here I am. But we have some fantastic panelists today. Our hope for this panel is that you came here to get specific questions or ideas answered, that you came here to get some things solidified in your mind about what are autonomous vehicles, how do they work, and how do first responders interact with them. So it's my sincerest hope that today will be an interactive discussion between our great panelists and yourselves, and that we will have the opportunity to address some significant questions that you might have, so you can walk away with the kind of a new idea on what this AV technology is and how first responders have been interacting with it. For those of you who don't know Waymo, just real briefly, Waymo is a transportation as a service company, also referred to often in the media as a robotaxi company. We're operating commercially currently in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Phoenix. We've been in Phoenix since 2018. And we just started commercial operations, as many of you may know, in Austin, Texas. Coming to you soon in Atlanta and Miami. I lead a team of now 7, soon to be 10, all retired law enforcement and fire executives whose specific purpose is to go to where Waymo is operating currently and work with first responders to help them understand the technology. There's nothing more important in my mind in gaining trust in AV technology on our roadways than helping first responders to understand how the technology works and how to safely work around it. So hopefully today's session will be beneficial for you. Please, if you have questions, raise your hand. I'm going to come out and move around the audience a little bit. So if you have a question, feel free to pause the presentation at any time, ask that question. We'll be happy to answer. With that, enough about me. I'd like to introduce my fantastic panel. We have Darcyne Foldenauer today from AVSC, the Autonomous Vehicle Safety Consortium. Is that correct?
Consortium.
Yes. Sometimes I get the C wrong. Dave Fawson from the California Highway Patrol Collision Investigation Unit, and Matt Holmes, Battalion Chief from Austin Fire Department. So with that, I'm going to allow the panelists to do a brief introduction, tell you a little bit about their expertise and background as it relates to AVs. So Darcyne.
Thank you. Okay. So, as Rob said, my name is Darcyne Foldenauer. I am the Executive Director of the Automated Vehicle Safety Consortium, or most people know us as the AVSC. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to share with you who we are, what we do. So our mission is really driven by our vision, which is public acceptance of SAE Level 4 and Level 5 autonomous driving vehicles. And we want people to understand that they are safe and beneficial form of transportation. As Rob mentioned, we believe and feel that they will be able to save lives. Obviously, that's why we support it. A lot less distractions when you think about AVs on the road. So our mission is to do that by collaborating with industry members to come together with standardization, so in terminology and what are the best practices. So we create these best practices that will hopefully lead to a standard, and then from those standards, we hope that it will drive into regulation and policy. So that's our goal. We do that by prioritizing some pre-competitive topics. The great thing about our consortium is we allow our members, we have 7 member organizations that come together. Waymo is one of them who participates. And in a pre-competitive environment, they can now talk about these best practices where it's not a form of collusion, right? They're just talking about what makes sense in the industry and bringing it all together. So we engage expertise of external stakeholders as well, and then we share the output. So our best practices are saved out on our website. They're also out on SAE Mobilis and SAE.org for anybody to access free. They are not, we do not charge for them. So the other unique thing about the AVSC is all of our members, it stands out a little differently from other consortiums because our members who participate, GM and Cruise, Torque, Uber, Aurora, Zoox, all of them participate in Volkswagen. All of them participate, but they also sign up to utilize and implement these best practices as well. And it takes 100% consensus for these best practices to be released. So before we can ever get to publication, which I'll talk about in a moment, we have a new one we just published last week. It takes a lot of work. It takes us 6 to 7 months to develop these and get agreement from all these member companies in order to publish them. So the reason we're here today, very excited to be here today because we have a best practice. It is the AVSC Best Practice for First Responder Interactions with ADS-DVs. So in this particular best practice, we actually talk about a framework for first responder interaction plans, which we're going to talk a lot about this morning, along with procedures and protocols for facilitating interactions in multiple use cases. So we talk about roles that are associated with emergency situations, so we basically call out terminology and try to standardize it. We describe common interactions between first responders and ADS-DVs, and we actually give recommendations regarding first responder and ADS-DV interactions, as well as the framework for a first responder interaction plan. We also talk about training and updates to that plan. So just some recent developments on this one. We originally published it back in 2020, and last year we decided to go ahead and make some updates to it. So it was just recently revised. Last year, I want to say it was April or May, we published it. And since then, we've taken it to SAE, and they have a task force that has now been assembled, appropriately titled J0911. So it's going to be cited in J3206 as well. So we're really close on J0911. I participate in that task force, and hopefully by May of this year is what they're targeting to get that published. And it would become a recommended practice through SAE. And that is ultimately what our goal is at AVSC. Okay, so I just wanted to show this one. This is the one I mentioned, AVSC Best Practice for ADS-DVs, Immediate Post-Crash Behavior and Interactions. This one just was published last week. I do believe that for the first responder community, it is one that you're going to be interested in. We talk about and give some guidance and focus on the ADS-DV behaviors immediately post-crash. And I think this is something everywhere we've been, we've heard a lot of first responders talk about what their expectations are and what they expect to see. So we do highlight 3 dependencies that impact the behavior and interaction of an ADS-DV. We give some illustrated scenarios followed by some questions and answers that helps explain the possible considerations that were taken into account before that ADS-DV took some actions. And then we defined 5 general stages of crash events and focus on immediate post-crash stage. And then we do give some recommendations on decision-making and evaluation of immediate post-crash behaviors. So with that, that's AVSC, and I'm going to go ahead and hand this over at this point. to, I believe, David, you're up next.
Yes, thank you, Darcyne. And it's super important to point out how critical this work is, bringing elements of the industry together to discuss these concerns, to discuss first responder interactions and how they work. So this work is super important, and those discussions have been super beneficial, I think, for all involved. Now we'll hear from Commander Dave Fawson, who's in charge of the CHP Collision Investigation Unit.
All right. Good morning, everyone. All right, hey, good, you're awake. That's good. So this is an interesting space to be in with AVs. Back in about 2012, I was an officer teaching at our CHP Academy in West Sacramento, and I was teaching vehicle code laws to our cadets. And we got an invite to go to our CHP headquarters and meet with a Google company for a presentation there. So as I go there, there was this really weird-looking Prius out in front, big tower on the top. And we went in there, Google was there to do a presentation. And the gentleman who's doing the presentation, his first slide showed a man driving a car playing the trumpet. And I thought, that's interesting. And his premise was, I said, people today drive out of necessity, not because they want to, but there's other things, they're multitasking now as they drive. And so what if we can develop a car that drives itself to give people more time to do what they want to do? And so they basically introduced their first autonomous driving vehicle. And they gave us a ride, full autonomous, from our CHP headquarters out to the Sacramento airport and back. And I remember sitting in the back of that car, and I was really uneasy about it, unsure of how this was going to go, see where the technology was going to go. But that following year, in 2013, was when laws were first established in California to authorize the testing of autonomous vehicles. And so fast forward to today, I'm in a position now as the commander of the Collision Investigation Unit with the CHP to assist the DMV in looking at how these cars are really operating safely on the roadways. So within California, I understand that other states have things differently. So California was one of the first states to establish a framework for AV use. And other states have taken similar approaches, some drastically different. And so we're kind of all over the board right now in the United States. But we kind of look at the federal government, what's their role in this? Their role is to ensure that the vehicles are safe. Beyond that, the states are now responsible for the safe operation of those vehicles. So in California, we have three main agencies that are responsible for that. First, we have the California DMV. They are the regulator of autonomous vehicles operating in the state of California. They issue the permits. The CHP, in law, it's written that the CHP can consult and assist with the regulations and ensuring that these vehicles are operating safely, which is one of my primary jobs, is to work with the regulators at the DMV. And then thirdly, we actually have the California Public Utilities Commission. So as we know that when Rob introduced the Waymo company, he said they're known as robo-taxis, kind of a false name in California because taxis are actually regulated at the local municipal level. When we talk about Waymos and other companies, they're a ride-sharing service such as Uber and Lyft. They're actually regulated under the Public Utilities Commission, which covers the full state of California. So it is a little different there, but if there's any type of ride-sharing service that these AVs will be using, or they'll be using them for that, that's why the PUC is involved in that. So with that said, you hear a lot of people talking about SAE levels or levels of driving automation. So let me ask you this, by a show of hands out in the audience, since most of you are awake from your rousing response from me this morning, how many of you can say, like, yeah, I understand automation levels in vehicles? Okay, actually more than I thought. So the majority of your hands are actually down. So I was looking at the hands down, not the hands up for that. But it is kind of a confusing concept from what I'm finding out. Now, I live and breathe this stuff, so it seems easy for me, but I just want to take a moment just to explain what the levels of automation are for everyone's sake here. There are 6 levels of automation, not 1 through 6, but 0 through 5. Why? Because engineers came up with this, right? So we have the Society of Automotive Engineers, SAE, levels here. So 0 means that there's no automation in your car. These are, really your old school cars. Most cars today being built have some sort of automation. So let's talk about driving automation 1. So when we get into autonomous vehicles, there's a phrase used called the dynamic driving task. When we drive a vehicle, it's a dynamic driving task. There's things always changing, things that we have to do and we have to account for. As other cars enter the roadway, as we change lanes, as we turn from one roadway to another, as weather conditions change, there's a lot of things that we have to do to be able to safely drive that vehicle. I have a daughter who just got her license last Monday, and day 2, she came in tears to me saying, I never want to drive again, because she happened to turn down the wrong way on a street, and it freaked her out. She didn't crash. Nobody crashed into her. She was okay. But it's a dynamic driving task, and there's a lot to do. And that's a human person, right? So how do we get computers to do that? Well, they assist us all the time if you have a car that's probably built from 2013 on. So, for example, if a car can take over one of those dynamic driving tasks for you, that's some sort of level of automation. For example, cruise control. You set your cruise control, and now the car, you don't have to worry about throttle modulation at all. The car will stay there right at 65 on the freeway, right? 65 is where you set your cruise control, and you go along. And so that would be considered a level 1 automation if that's all you're doing with that car. Automatic emergency braking could be a level of automation. You're not paying attention, a car slows down in front of you very fast, you don't hit on your brakes, the car alerts you, it does automatic braking. That's a level of automation. But if one of them is working, that's level 1. Partial automation is when we have 2 or more working in conjunction with each other. This is a huge range and a huge marketplace right now in the automotive industry. This is where if I have my cruise control set, okay, so I have my longitudinal task being handled here. And then if I have lane center keeping assist, so that now my car's going to stay within the lane, whether I'm steering or not, or just rest my hands on my steering wheel. Now I have that latitudinal direction. That's a level 2 automated car because you have 2 systems working together. And then take any combination all the way up to, we know that Chevy, Ford, Tesla, they have all these, even more features where the cars can even change lanes. But even through all that, it is still considered a level 2 autonomy. And within that, you are still the driver. The human behind the wheel is considered the driver. So a lot of times in the news and a lot of things that we see and the CHP gets asked about are crashes involving Teslas, where a driver claims like, hey, I had full self-driving on. In parentheses, it says driver supported, right? So it's not true autopilot, it's not true self-driving. The person behind the wheel is still the driver. And I've been to many crash scenes where I talk to the driver and say, well, but I had it in autopilot, so the car was driving. I'm like, no, you're still the driver. You recognize that, right? So there is a bit of work for us to understand with that, and even for the publics to understand that as well. So when we start getting into what we call AVs or consider AVs, this is where we get in the space of level 3 and level 4. I'm not even going to talk about level 5 because level 5 doesn't even exist. That's a car that can drive from point A to point B at any time, any given day, in all conditions. We're not there yet, and there's not a car that exists at level 5. And I believe we're ways off for that. So what's level 3? Level 3 is actually a conditional automation. That means you're behind the wheel, you start the car, and if the conditions are right, the car will alert you that you can engage the autonomous vehicle technology, and then the car will take over the complete dynamic driving task. And now you become a passenger, even though you're in the driver's seat. Right now, there's one car commercially available in California, and that's the Mercedes-Benz Drive Pilot car. So that's the only level 3 car that we have available for the public. Now, there's a lot of companies in California, I'll show you in a little bit, that are testing through level 3 technology, but there is one available right now, and they also sell the cars in Nevada with that. Level 4 is a high automation. That's where the car is capable to go to level 1 to level 2. However, there are certain parameters or conditions. There's an operational design domain that they work within, so they can't go anywhere, but they have a pre-described route or a map that they know that they can navigate through. Typically, these cars also have a remote assistance operator who can assist that vehicle in predicting its path or help. But these are cars that truly have no person inside of them. And this is the space that Waymo operates in, Zoox operates, other companies operate in, and where the AV industry is trying to get to right now is to get a nice, solid level 4 vehicle. So if you have any more questions about that, feel free to ask me afterwards. I can talk about this all day. I'm going to move on to the next part. So you saw the title of my slide here, my presentation. It's who's driving that vehicle. So as a law enforcement officer, if I pull over a car and I walk up there, there's a human there, I can interact with them, I can tell them license, registration, insurance, tell them what they did wrong, give them a ticket, press hard 4 copies, they sign up and they go on their way, right? And that's kind of our interaction in an active enforcement application. But if we have a car that now can drive without a human, who is the driver? So in California, in our laws, we define what a driver is or who a driver is. It is a person who drives or is in actual physical control of a vehicle. Makes sense, right? But we define that. Further, we define what a person is. So a person includes a natural person, all of us in this room, or also it includes a firm, co-partnership, association, limited liability company, or corporation. So that's been on the books for a while, but this is important when we switch over to the AV world because I have a snippet of what the application process looks like, or the first application page if you want to apply to operate an autonomous vehicle in California. And you have to select the ownership type. So is it a sole ownership? Is it a partnership, corporation, or an association? So you mark that box. In other words, you're stating that this AV technology in this car is going to become the driver. And that's how we view it here in our state. So often we get asked, like, what laws do AVs have to abide by? Well, any law in California begins with some of these phrases here. You know, the driver of any vehicle, no vehicle shall be driven, and so on. So anytime you see the word driver, we use it synonymously to mean or AV technology. That's how we view these cars. So it is actually the technology of the vehicle, not necessarily the registered owner or anybody else, but who created that technology for that. That is the driver of the vehicle. So in California, as I said, we see a lot of this activity right now. San Francisco Bay Area, Los Angeles, San Diego, those are the hotbed areas of where we're seeing these vehicles being tested or deployed. We have 3 different permits that companies can apply for. They can apply for a testing permit, and then within there, there's a driver testing permit where someone's always behind the wheel, but they're testing the autonomous vehicle technology. So that person's ready to take over control right away. That's easy for law enforcement. We pull that car over, there's a person in there, we can interact with them easy. Or they can apply for a driverless testing permit, and then after they've proven to the regulators, to the DMV, that this technology is supported and capable of deployment, they can move to a driverless deployment permit at that point. And this is just a list of some of the companies that we see here through the driverless testing and deployment of who we have in California. So I want to wrap up my presentation with you today is what's not working first for us. Because we see a lot of things in the media. And I can tell you this is exactly what's not working right now, is when you see headlines or things through social media about incidents that happen on the roads involving autonomous vehicles, I can tell you that 90% of the time, it's not correct. You don't know the full story of what's going on. And that's where I have the opportunity to meet with the DMV regulators, to go to the companies that are manufacturing these AVs, and to discuss what really happened. Was it a human error by that remote assistance operator that put the car in that perilous position? Is it something that would have happened to any car out there? Because let's face it, human drivers are not predictable, right? We'd like to think AVs are more predictable than humans, but they're not. It's an emerging technology, and we've seen some pretty crazy things that these AVs do. But we've also seen some pretty amazing things these cars have done as well. So we always like to give the good with the bad on that. But I can tell you right now, if you see something on the news, chances are you don't have the full story. So how can we improve that? What can we do as a regulator, as first responders, as anybody in the space that wants to try to improve and make sure these things are safe, is we want to ensure there's proper investigation and documentation into these cases. It's interesting that we have not had many AV crashes in California that involved injuries. We've had over 700 crashes involving these cars. Some of them were human involved, some were the technology, but they do have to self-report to the DMV anytime there is a crash. But for injury crashes where law enforcement gets involved and investigate those, there are relatively few that have occurred on that. But it's important for us to document those. Not just that, but even the other interactions that occur that don't result in a crash. What we found is to have regular meetings between the manufacturers, the regulators, and other first responders. This is critical, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this throughout this morning. But these law enforcement interaction plans, they are more than just a document for us. I've had the opportunity to go out to VTTI there in Virginia, Virginia Tech. I've had the opportunity to go out to Texas A&M to work with different working groups and committees, and everybody's looking at this on how can we find a solution to help with this interaction. Because really, from the law enforcement perspective, when I approach a vehicle, I expect to be able to interact with that car a certain way. And if there's no human in there, I would expect to be able to interact with the car in a similar way and not have it be some drastically different thing. So these law enforcement interaction plans, yes, they are distributed in California to the law enforcement agencies, but for the law enforcement officers in the room, let's face it, we get another pack, a document, are we going to sit there and read that? Is it really pertinent to us if we're not really seeing these cars? Probably not. So how do we get that water to the end of the road? How do we really make it worthwhile for us to open up and to read? Well, one, we don't want to read like a 30, 40-page document, right? That's even less motivating for us to do. But what we found is that these companies, when they work with first responders, they take the vehicle to their office, they have a training day, and they show them how to interact with them, how to get in the car. That, to me, has been the biggest key and the biggest change for us in knowing how to successfully work with these cars. Just a few weeks ago, we had an AV that was blocking lanes on an on-ramp in San Francisco. And one of our responding CHP officers approached it, was able to walk up to the car, talk through the window. There was nobody there, but was able to reach the remote assistance operator, was able to tell them who they were. They were able to get in the car, put the car in manual mode. The officer was able to drive it to a safe location on the freeway. He went back to his patrol car, and then he was able to leave the scene and clear that. So now, do we do that with human people? Sure, we can someone direct the human person to move over. Sometimes the person may be impaired or have a medical emergency, where sometimes the officers do have to jump in that car and move it ourselves. So there's really no difference in how we operate with that. But this is kind of the space where us all collaborating and working together is a great way for us to try to see, okay, how can we continue to do the same operation as officers and apply that to these AVs and have the AV companies work with us to be able to find those solutions. And I think we're not there yet, but we have made great progress with that, and we're continuing to make those strides. And as we start seeing them open up to new markets, other parts of the country, I would love to see a little more standardization with that, as we've heard from, from different groups, and everyone's trying to do the same thing, but sometimes we don't get together and talk about it. So this is a great space for us to try to get together and talk about these things, so make sure we're sharing the same ideas to see some sort of standard nationwide for this. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And as Chief Holmes gets set up here, some super important points I think that Dave makes there, especially as it relates to the SAE levels. I know a few of you are aware of the SAE levels, but understanding that level 1 through 3 element always requires an attentive human driver behind the wheel. Levels 4 and 5 never designed from day one, never to need a human behind the wheel. So super important. As I go around the country and help to educate first responders on this topic, we see that a little bit of confusion regarding that on a fairly regular basis. And I know we're going to talk more about the important work Dave's team does involving law enforcement interaction protocols or first responder interaction protocols. First responder interaction protocols being key because it's not just law enforcement, it's the necessary information that the fire side needs, which makes a perfect intro for our next speaker, Chief Matt Holmes from the Austin Fire Department.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Matt Holmes, Austin Fire Department. This is my first Lifesavers conference. Been pretty impressed, made some observations. How many folks in the audience are law enforcement? Just raise a hand. That's a lot of hands. How many are fire? Nobody. All right, so I'm in enemy territory. I understand that. But you know what? We all have something in common, and the fact is that when we were very, very little kids, we all wanted to grow up to be firefighters. That's the one thing we have in common. All right, so I'm a battalion chief with the Austin Fire Department. Currently, I'm in the Spec Ops division, so my job is pretty much the care and feeding of our special operators. Besides making fires and medicals, we do swiftwater rescue, hazmat, confined space, tunnel rescue, tower rescue, all those kinds of things. So I'm very fortunate that I get to do that. And in addition to that, I get to work with the AV safety group. Is this thing on? Maybe it is on now. There we go. Excellent. So if you have AVs operating in your area, once again, I am not a lawyer, I'm not an engineer, and I'm not a lobbyist. So a lot of my content is going to be like boots on the ground type of stuff. What we have seen in the Austin Fire Department as we've been interacting with AVs for the past year plus, almost 2 years, these are the people that we get to work with. So hopefully, I think a lot of this will make some sense. So in the state of Texas, Texas is different than California. Whenever AVs come into Austin and they're going to work and operate, we obviously want to be very proactive. We want to meet with those folks and we give them a sheet. And at the very top of the sheet, it says in Texas, cities cannot regulate or permit autonomous vehicles. So we don't have any regulatory authority, all right? And, we say, howdy, welcome to Austin, because that's how we talk in Texas, right? And so we outline a couple of things that we want to be. We want to be very proactive. We want to be out and meet with the autonomous vehicles. We want to shake hands, meet face-to-face, start having that dialogue. And so we outline a couple of things that we expect. Obviously, we want to collect data, data-driven, right? The AV companies want to collect data. We want to collect data. All right, so we want to have some back and forth there. We want to be able to facilitate feedback, right? Makes sense? And we want to make sure that we have all the AV safety specs. We want to make sure we have the contact numbers, the point of contact individual. We want to make sure we have the safety sheets, so therefore, in a vehicle collision, if we're going to cut somebody out of the vehicle or if we're going to put water on that vehicle fire, then we want to make sure we're doing it in the safe possible place. We want to have 24/7 contact, and we also want to talk about exclusion zones and don't block access. I think obviously in California, there's been lots of information out there about some AVs periodically, maybe a couple of years ago, kind of getting confused or blocking access to fire stations, police stations, EMS stations. So we want to make sure we outline all of those things. Exclusion zones, obviously, if you've ever been to Austin, it's no different than any other big city, but it's very, very busy. Lots of things happen. We have South by Southwest going on right now. That's probably a couple 100,000 people. We have the Prime Minister of Ireland was talking yesterday. We have a lot of things going on. We had NASCAR the weekend before. We have Formula One in October. That's 500,000 people. 150,000 people came to watch Eminem last year. So we have lots of things going on. We have UT football. And so we're going to talk about what those exclusion zones mean and how the city of Austin coordinates that with our AV companies as they operate. So with the AV Safety Work Group, one of the things that we've done that I feel has been very beneficial is that we make sure we collect data, right? We make sure that we provide information, we listen to our citizens, and we communicate that with the AVs. So who is in the AV Safety Work Group? Well, that's Austin Fire Department, Austin Police Department, Austin Travis County EMS, and Transportation and Public Works. Those are the four big groups. But as the AVs have kind of expanded and we've had more interactions, we now include ABIA, which is our Austin area airport. We include Cap Metro, which is our busing system. And now we include Austin Independent School District. So as these AVs are, roaming around, either collecting data or doing ride sharing, all that kind of stuff, we want to make sure we're bringing people in so we can collect data. So you can kind of see our dashboard here. And the way we collect data is if fire has an interaction with an AV, we put that information in, if PD does. Or if just an everyday citizen has an interaction with an autonomous vehicle, then they can call our 311 and they can provide that information, and that stuff gets uploaded here, and then we communicate that information immediately with the autonomous vehicle company. Say, hey, just so you know, sometime this morning, this happened. Want to make sure you're aware of it, and then we try to start facilitating that dialogue. So therefore, we can the goal is for AVs to operate safely in Austin. So at the very bottom, this has been a while back, you might have seen this kind of went viral. One of the AV companies, at the end of a UT football game where real football is played, let's just put that out there, that's where real football is played. After the UT football game, about 100,000 plus people are leaving the stadium. So we had an AV company that for whatever reason, it was like Borg, if you're a Star Trek fan, all the vehicles kind of went to one area and blocked everybody from getting out of there. Now, I've heard that it might have been a bunch of frat boys that called and kind of made it happen. I don't know if that's true or not, but it did cause a hassle for a lot of folks. The other one is actually a dash cam or a camera from one of our engines. And I think it'll play. There's no cursing, although I'd probably still play it if there was cursing. But let me see if I can get that going here. Oh, maybe no audio. There should be some audio. Well, kind of what's happened here is fire truck is pulled up in an intersection. There's a stop sign. We're giving plenty of space between the white vehicle in front. No lights, no sirens, just driving. And for whatever reason, this autonomous vehicle decided to pull around the fire truck and just park right in the middle. And, our driver's going, what are they doing? Total catastrophe. Look at this traffic. We like to complain just like anybody else, right? So this is kind of a nuisance type of call. So once again, not dangerous, but definitely kind of a nuisance, and also a kind of a question like, hey, why did it do that? Why is it making that move? So obviously, even though something like this, we're going to bring it back to the AV companies and we're going to ask them, hey, just so you know, this is what happened, such and such date, such and such intersection. We actually have video. We're going to share that with you. Can you please talk to engineers and we can kind of talk about this and kind of go forward, because that way we can go back to these folks and say, hey, we've talked to them, they're working on it, and we're going to kind of try to come to some other resolution. Also with our safety work group, The AV companies are great about meeting us, shaking hands, discussing. David mentioned it earlier about the training. We call these AV petting zoos, right? So obviously you have representations, you have reps showing up, some engineers, you've got people that are probably on the first responder safety committee of that organization. We get to talk, shake hands, give a presentation. We get to go out and see static displays of the vehicles. Open the doors, pop the hood, ask questions. It's a very good give and take. You get to kind of touch and pet and feed the AV, and then you use hand sanitizer at the end of it. It's really, really good. But we kind of want to make sure, now we want to talk about AV safaris. So one of the best things that we're trying to do, and some AVs are for it, some are not, is that we have places like UT. There's a campus called the J.J. Pickle campus. It's still, it's still active. There's a lot of things going on there. But they have a way to kind of close roads down. So you can kind of test AV technology, or we can run scenarios with our AV partners. Like, hey, how do you really interact with hand signals? How do you interact with cones placement? How do you interact with our vehicles as they're backing into fire stations? So those are the kind of things that the petting zoos are great initial. We would like to go to the AV safaris so we can have more of a scenario-based type of training, okay? And the reason why we do that is because we've been doing this for a year and a half or so, or 2 years, and we're kind of thinking that that's the way we're going. So once again, this is from the Austin Fire Department perspective. So what are our best practices? Trying to get into the nuts and bolts. So once again, working on the AV task force, AV safety work group. Over 1.5 years of collaborations with AV companies. We've talked with fire departments across the country, including San Francisco, Phoenix, LA. We're talking to them about what worked for them. And so we're taking that information. We're also talking to subject matter experts in law, subject matter experts in tech, and subject matter experts in cybersecurity. So these are where we're trying to get our information. We're not just in our own little bubble. We're expanding our knowledge base. So therefore, once again, the goal is that we want AVs and us to be able to interact safely. I'm not anti-AV tech, far from it. I just want to make sure I tap on the shoulder and say, hey, what about us? Let's think about us a little bit. So some of the best practices, and I'm sure Darcyne and her group, and we do have somebody from our safety work group who is on that J0911 commission, or that committee, exterior voice-to-voice communication. Whether it's law enforcement, fire, whatever, how quickly can we get communication? We all know that face-to-face communication is great, not only from verbal but nonverbal cues. Like, you see somebody go, I'm sorry, I didn't know what I was doing. Or, they give you the, one finger salute or whatever. You lose that with AVs, and you're trying to figure out how are we going to communicate with them. So exterior voice-to-voice communication. There usually are, on a lot of these autonomous vehicles, there's a QR code or there's a number. Sometimes our folks should have the number in their phone. Sometimes they're able to access it. Sometimes they aren't. So having quick exterior voice-to-voice communication with a remote operator is very, very important. And what is the procedure for that? If we're talking about standardization, it'd be kind of cool if all of the vehicles did the same way. AV mode or manual mode? I've got an AV that's coming into my scene, or I've got an AV that's in my scene for whatever reason. How do I know it's in autonomous mode? How do I know it's in manual mode? Manual mode means I know it's going to stay there and it's going to do what I want it to do like a normal vehicle. And so how do I differentiate between this to make sure that I'm safe, right? How do we do that? And then down at the bottom, we have some of these newer vehicles. I think Zooks has got one, and the Zeekr, I call these the push me, pull you type of vehicles, right? So this is that new next level automation that doesn't have a steering wheel in it or pedals. How are we supposed to take control of that vehicle? I don't know. So these are the kinds of questions that we need to ask. David mentioned that sometimes we're no different than they are. We sometimes have to move vehicles for whatever reason. Once we make sure that the life safety threat is over, we may have to move the vehicle. So how do we do that with those? These are things that we're asking, and these are the active kind of conversations we're having with these AV companies so that we are definitely part of that discussion. Once again, are AVs going to respond appropriately to emergency lights and sirens, traffic cones, and hand signals? Now, this is another video, quick video, and I don't think the audio has been working, and that's okay. But typically, these big old fire trucks, we don't have stations where we pull straight in. We have to stop traffic, kind of take the entire road over and back into it. And so typically when firefighters or crews get to where they're going to go, they're going to return to their station, put on the lights pretty early as we're approaching that area where the fire station is. We make sure everybody is stopped, and then they will pull out and take the entire oncoming traffic, all of it, and then firefighter will get out of the fire truck, hook on headsets, and then back that big rig into where into the bay. So this is kind of what happened here. Let's see if I can get it to play. Oh, there it goes. So they've already pulled, blocked traffic, lights are on, no sirens, but lights are on, and this AV, for whatever reason, decided to keep nudging, getting close, keep getting close. And so right now we're blocking the roadway. It's kind of a hassle, kind of a nuisance, right? This is a nuisance. It was going slow, but we still don't know if it keeps coming towards us, why is it doing that? So this is another reason why we would take our AV partners and we say, hey, this is what happened. I got video of it. I'm going to give you the video. Let's talk about this and let's see kind of how we can prevent that. And so what we have done is I know that we've actually, all of our AV companies should know where every fire station is, where every school is, where every EMS station is, where all the police stations are. They should know that already. It's just kind of not an exclusion zone. We're not saying you can't drive in front of a fire station. Just letting you know that that's where that location is. So in this case, it didn't really respond appropriately for us to the lights. It didn't just back off. It just kind of came into our area where we didn't feel comfortable. Another term that we use is called geofencing. So when I talked about exclusion zones, we're talking about events, big South by events happening this week. So we reach out to the autonomous vehicle companies and say, hey, this is where streets are going to be closed. This is where other things are going to be happening. Please be mindful of that, be respectful of that. And the AV companies are pretty good about, hey, we get it. We don't want to get in that area. It's, normal. We don't restrict them from where other people can go. We just want to let them know. We're not saying if a vehicle can go there, the autonomous vehicles can go there. So we're not making a special exception for them, but we want to make sure they know that. But we've also talked about emergency comes in. Let's say a big second alarm fire, or an active attack, an active shooter comes in. You've got lots of resources that are going to be going to a certain location. Our dispatch dispatches those units. In Austin, we're able to go through our dispatch center, and the autonomous vehicles provide an email, and our computer-aided dispatch will shoot this information to that email so the remote operators can put up a geofence. And for us, we request 1,000 feet for 1 hour because they don't want to be in our area. We don't want them in the area. It's everybody's best interest to stay away from that area. You would probably like that if you were driving around, if that popped up on your phone and said, hey, don't go here. It's going to be a nightmare. So these is things that we are working with our autonomous vehicle companies. They've been really good about that. We just need to kind of follow up and see how that train goes. Because one company may say, oh yeah, we can do that in 3 minutes. So 3 minutes from when we get your email from your computer-aided dispatch, our vehicle should be responding to that geofence that we just set up. Some companies, might say 20 minutes. So you can see there's kind of a difference of efficiency, I guess. So those are the kind of conversations we're trying to have. So last thing is complete feedback loop. I think I've mentioned it time and time again. We want to share information with our AVs. We're very proactive. So this is not a video, but this is an incident that happened February 11th, okay, right by UT. This is going to be engine 2. All right, so this is a call that came in at 5 o'clock in the morning, wires down. So this road had wires hanging low across this roadway, and they were blocking traffic until we could get City of Austin Electric to come deal with the problem. So picture, if you will, we've got cones set up on the lane that's coming towards us. Behind us, we've got the wires down, and then behind that, on the other side, facing this way, we have the big red fire truck with their lights on. No sirens, just lights on. So basically, we've shut down this roadway, happened at 5 o'clock in the morning. So this autonomous vehicle was coming towards us, or towards the incident, and according to the lieutenant, might have stopped, definitely slowed down, not a high rate of speed, saw the cones, and then decided to go around the cones and come into our incident. Now, that's really not a nuisance call for me, right? And so, fortunately for these firefighters, autonomous vehicles love to operate around UT campus. I get it. A lot of young people, they don't have vehicles, they're tech savvy, you know, they're going to use it. It's a great idea. But these firefighters are used to dealing with these autonomous vehicles. So, the lieutenant, or the driver who was riding higher up, he was able to see the vehicle coming. He said, "Hey, stop, stop, stop." And he realized, that's not going to work. So was able to approach it to the side, take his hand, and slap the hood. Now, in this autonomous vehicle, when that happens, they stop, and he knew that. Then he took one of the cones and placed it on the hood, just to make sure it doesn't move. Once again, autonomous mode versus manual mode. And then he knew he was going to go around to the driver's side door where the QR code was to start calling. And about that time, the windows rolled down, and so they started talking with remote assistance. And so he was busy with other things, so he stepped away, and his firefighter, that firefighter there, is talking to remote assistance saying, "Hey, this is what's going on," and they were able to get the vehicle to back up and go the other way. So this is something, obviously, I think this happened at 5 o'clock in the morning. Before noon that day, we had already contacted the AV company and told them, "This is what's going on. We need to talk about it." So we need to have those feedback loops, right? Because if these firefighters were busy doing other things, they may not have seen this vehicle slow down and decide to go around the cones. So this is something that we need to talk about, right? We need to talk with their engineers, and what does that feedback loop look like for us? So those are the kind of things we're working on. I'll finish off with one last thing. This has been a really great conference. I've heard some really great things about technology. And, you know, all I can say is only in California, stretching my legs yesterday. You know, just want you to stay safe out there, right? Even that dog says that's pretty kick-ass. All right? All right. Sorry. See if I can get it to go to my last slide. All right. Thank you very much. I'll take care.
So are you hearing a theme here from our panelists, right? So something that I'll emphasize that I've learned over the years working with Chief Holmes' team and other teams in other cities, the key here is communication and collaboration, right? The technology is ever evolving, and for many, it's new. I won't say it's new. Some of these companies have been operating, I'll speak for Waymo, for a very long time. But the important thing is collaboration and communication. The important thing is understanding what this technology is and what it isn't when it comes to your city, so that you know how to interact safely with it. And I will confirm what Chief Holmes said. We work regularly with the Austin team, and we have great communication. We talk about things when they occur, and we make every effort to make sure that whatever did occur that shouldn't have doesn't happen again. So, and that is the key. We've had experiences in other municipalities where they were less apt to communicate with AV companies, where information kind of got withheld and it turned into more of more of a got you, than a, hey, let's fix this, or let's see what happened here. It's not always something that requires a fix. Sometimes it's on the tech side, sometimes it's on the responder side, but that's why you have to have these communications. That's why you have to have this kind of collaboration. How many of you actually work in communities now that have some level of autonomous vehicles? So we're talking 4 and 5s, right? So a few of you. So the ones that don't, I'd just like you to think for a minute about a scenario. You had a new AV company come into your town. They're providing, we'll say, transportation as a service. You get a call of a collision at an intersection where an AV is waiting at a red light, number 2 in the stack. It gets rear-ended by a pickup truck. The pickup truck pushes the AV and the other vehicle out into the intersection. You rolled up on the scene. What kind of things do you need to know? What kind of things do you need to understand? This is the interactive portion of the presentation. So, yeah. Huh? Sir?
How to be able to communicate with it, how to get it off the roadway so we can get traffic moving and also get information.
Okay, for the rest of you, he says how to communicate, how to find out, how do I get this thing out of the way? How do I get traffic moving, get this intersection cleared, right? What other kind of things do you want to know? Sir, in the back?
How to get the responsible parties information exchanged so that they can handle the follow-up with their insurance companies and determine who's at fault and all of that.
Right, who's responsible, how do I get information exchanged? Where do I find the documents? Something as simple as that, right? Is it on a QR code on the vehicle? Is it over the sun visor? Where is the information that I can get this information exchanged and get these parties on their way? And of course, who is the driver, right? Who is the driver? And Commander Fawson talked about, the way California goes about determining who the drivers are, right? So all this stuff, I really think it comes down to 2 key points, and the 2 key points are understanding the law enforcement or first responder interaction protocols for the vehicles that are operating in a community. Where are they? Where do I find them? What do I know about them? As Commander Fawson said, you're not going to, I won't speak for you, but I'll speak for the cops that used to work for me. They're not going to sit down and read 33 pages of a law enforcement interaction protocol. Our law enforcement interaction protocols are 33 pages long. But what I tell people when I go out and provide instruction is, look up the parts you need to know, look up the sections you need to know. Where is that documentation, right? How do I put this vehicle in manual mode? What's important to you? Understand that so when you get to a scene, and very importantly, as you heard from our entire panel, have a training session with the AV company. Get out there, get your hands on that car, look at it. What did you call it, a petting zoo, Matt?
Petting zoo.
Okay, yeah. We haven't journeyed into the safaris yet at Waymo, but the petting zoos we participate in all the time, and I cannot tell you how important they are. If you saw the faces of the cops, when I walk into a room in a city that didn't ever have AVs, and I say, hey, this is a Waymo, this is how it operates, I'm gonna demystify it for you, I'm gonna explain some things about how to operate with it. The difference on the faces of those cops when they walk in the room and when they walk out of the room is amazing. They go from totally uncomfortable to reasonably comfortable that they can operate around this thing and get their job done. So it's super, super important. So thanks to the panelists for the great presentation. So let me catch up on my notes here, sorry. I'm walking around too much, so.
Real quick, I think another thing, like I said, there's a bunch of cops in here, and I get where you're kind of coming from, but for us, it's life safety first. So I want to make sure that vehicle, first off, is it autonomous? Now, we know that a lot of autonomous vehicles, they look like autonomous vehicles because they've got the LiDAR and the radar array systems. They've got these big bubble things on the roof, and they got things on their mirrors. They look like an autonomous vehicle. So I think when somebody's calling 911 for a collision, that they may be able to understand and let us know en route that this is going to be an autonomous vehicle collision or whatever. But we also have another company that's going to come in Austin, Texas, supposedly in June, to start do robo-taxis, and they will look just like any other vehicle on the roadway. They don't have LiDAR or radar array systems. They looks like any other vehicle. So for us, being able to understand that it's an AV and being able to approach it safely to make sure it's in manual mode, or we're going to stabilize that vehicle in such a way so it does not move, and then identifying how many patients you have, how many occupants you have. Those are the kind of things. So whether we get that from the remote assistance or we get that from a passenger, those are the things we have to kind of figure out on our end. And then it's book 'em, Dano. You know, I mean, then we turn over to law enforcement. But yeah, just those are the kind of things I know for us that we have to think about is identifying the AV first and foremost. Some are easier than others. Others, you know, like I said, it'll just look like a regular vehicle, and we're going to have to play catch up on that.
Yeah, absolutely, super important. So, so for the panel, if you could describe just quickly, you know, one bullet sentence, what does success look like for you when you have AVs operating in a community?
I'll let you go, Darcy.
So I think from our standpoint, success would be if there's an incident that our first responders know exactly how to communicate with that vehicle. The goal and the hope is that they've already participated in, you know, we're calling them AV safaris or petting zoos. Torque Robotics actually does what they call road shows, where they take their automated trucks on the road and to the communities where they're going to be operating. So a lot of them similar. But I think it is basically, you know, that the first responders already have that information or know where to find it and how to access it easily.
Yeah, I would say that AVs on the road should either meet or exceed the same driving patterns of a human driver. There's still issues, just like there are with human drivers. If I also have to turn my lights and sirens on, drive code 3, sometimes people don't get out of my way, and sometimes AVs don't get out of our way. But as long as there's a reasonable effort there that meets or exceeds that of a human driver, then I think that's success.
What, Dave, just to clarify that humans don't always pull to the right and stop?
So humans are not predictable, believe it or not.
Chief Holmes?
Yeah, I think just going back to for us as first responders, what I see success is I see good feedback loops, and I see issues that we've seen last year are no longer an issue. Those things are fixed. And going forward, so that's, you know, like I said, I'm not anti-tech. I think the tech is great, and I think, but I think there's two parts to it. I think there is obviously explaining to us, the knuckle draggers, what the tech is, but there's also the tech understanding what we do. So I think there's both sides of the story here, but like I said, I think the successful is that we continue the collaboration, we bring up issues that we see, and we see those AV companies working and resolving those issues. That's success to me.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point that you make there. And I'll speak for Waymo, but I know when we go out and do our trainings, we call them training sessions. We go out and do training sessions, but when we go out and do training sessions, we don't just come into your agency and say, here's our tech, here's how it works, deal with it, goodbye now. We come in and we say, this is how our tech works, and this is the way it's designed. What do you think? How is it working with you? What would you like to see different? And we have made significant changes to the way first responders interact with the tech based on feedback from other organizations. So it is absolutely imperative for safe operations of these AVs in the communities that it be a two-way street, that communication go both ways. So, Commander Fawson, I know that your unit does a lot of review of law enforcement interaction protocols and how they work and what looks good and what works successfully. What kind of gaps have you seen, and how has improving those gaps been approached?
So when we review those, I have to look at our regulations of how we have that set up. I'd say the biggest gap that we've seen right now is that we call them law enforcement interaction plans. I think as we start interacting with other entities and around the country, we realize that it truly is a first responder interaction plan because, you know, police, fire, EMS, we all interact with these things, even tow companies interact with them in an emergency situation. So to just have it just for law enforcement, I think was a little short-sighted in the beginning. But again, these are things that we learn on our end. So just trying to expand that. But again, in the absence of expanding to be a 33-plus page document, having sections the way it's organized, a consistent organization of that is really key for us to know, okay, what section do I need to go to see that? I don't care, for me, in my profession, where to cut that car or not cut the car. That's fire's responsibility, right? Just like they're probably not worried about pulling that vehicle over, how it's going to pull over and react if you approach it. So I think knowing those sections and be able to find them quickly is important for us.
Yeah, and I know that's a great point. I know there's a lot of work being done on the industry side and in other places where there's an effort moving forward to standardize some of these first responder interaction protocols.
I think we had a hand up earlier here.
Did we? Did I miss one?
Right up
Right in
front.
the front?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Sure.
I don't want to worry about being heard. Thank you so much for this. As someone who works in behavioral traffic safety, the idea of taking the human factor risk out of traffic is so appealing. And last month I had the chance to take a Waymo from the Phoenix airport to Scottsdale and kind of putting my money where my mouth is. And it was, first couple minutes were really disconcerting, you know. But the rest of the ride, I relaxed. I felt safe, you know. And on that note of the public perception of the safety of these vehicles, I wanted to ask you, Lieutenant Fawson, I feel like you were being really diplomatic in one of your slides when you're talking about how these news stories that we see about AV crashes, that there's usually more behind the story. Could you elaborate on that? Are you talking about human behavior perhaps playing a larger role than an error on the part of the vehicle itself, or does that make sense?
Sure, yeah. One comes to mind, well, actually, a lot of them come to mind, is that a lot of the news stories, or it's, you know, it focuses on the AV. AV crashes into, like there was one in San Francisco, for example, AV crashes into a man on a bicycle in an intersection. Well, it was actually the man on the bicycle who crashed into the AV if we truly look at the evidence and the data on that, right? These cars, they capture there's so much telemetrics, it's capturing the videos and everything else that we have that data. You know, and the officers, they reach out to Rob, say, hey, can we get this video information? And, you know, looking at, you know, the course of law, if we need a warrant or not, they're able to release that information for us. But I'd say 9 times out of 10, it does favor the AVs of being in the right and the other people being in the wrong. So a lot of times, but in the absence of somebody give that statement, is again, news statements always want to capture a person, right? Oh, what did they say? The cars aren't talking. You know, they don't have a statement, right? Then you wait for, you know, one of the AV companies to come out with a diplomatic statement as far as what happens. We're looking into this matter, or however they phrase it. So many times it is skewed towards the AV having a problem with it. It's sometimes warranted, but more often than not, we find that it's not, that it's really a human that caused an issue with them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, there's a lot of intense interest in this AV idea, right? And much of it because of the potential, it actually goes beyond potential. We've seen it. It's saving lives. It's reducing injuries, right? But because of that, there is an intensity of scrutiny sometimes in the media. So it's important that we have both sides of the story, for sure. And just to clarify, I know that a couple of the panelists have talked about remote assistance. For those of you who may not be as experienced with AVs, and again, I'll speak strictly for Waymo, but we don't have someone in a control room with a joystick. Nobody's sitting in a basement with a joystick moving our cars around, right? When we say remote assistance, we have humans that can look at a situation and provide potential answers for the tech when it sees an ambiguous situation. So, but just want to clarify that. But there is a human element to that for sure. So we talked a little bit. Did we have any other questions? I want to be sure you guys have time for questions. Sir, let me bring the mic around for you.
It's for Lieutenant. I'm a motor officer, traffic investigator at my agency. Have you seen any issues writing paper for AVs or, you know, some of the Teslas that are coming out when it comes to a fatal or a major injury collision? Like I've used Mate before for coming out and downloading my airbag control modules. Have you seen any issues with that? And if so, how have you dealt with it?
I can tell you we do have great work relationships. Our mates have great relationships with Tesla and other companies, but again, it's following the protocol, right? If they can give it to us freely, or if we need a warrant, they work with us. They play well in the sandbox, you can say. This emerging technology, though, especially with AVs, I know there is some upcoming training that our mates are going to go out and receive about really this level 2 and level 3, level 4 technology on how to download it, how to analyze it, because it's tough. I mean, we're talking about engineers that are designing a car to drive, and now with our officers that are trained to be reconstructionists, you know, to what level are they able to capture that data and review it? So trying to keep it, you know, consistently with what we have. That's kind of another emerging side that we don't really talk about in these big public forums, but it is interesting, and we do kind of rely a little bit on industry to at least steer us in the direction where to find that information on the vehicles themselves, because they really are rolling computers, in the trunk. There's a lot of information there. But you did mention something I want to bring up about like cutting paper on these things. That it's interesting in the world. Like you pull over a car, they committed an infraction, we issue a citation. So how do you issue a citation to a driverless vehicle is a big question we have. So this year, a new law was added to 37850 of the California Vehicle Code that allows officers to issue what we call a notice of noncompliance form. So right now, or let me back up just a little bit and explain this. Officers give tickets not because we're having a bad day, believe it or not, but because we want to change behavior. So how do you change behavior on a car that's driven by a computer? You have to change the programming. So we in California, we looked at how do we change the computer programming so this car drives correctly. Because believe it or not, we have seen AVs commit moving violations, but there's no mechanism to issue them a citation for that. So this notice of noncompliance, we're in the process of creating it. There's some regulations that have to be established before it'll be sent out to all agencies. We're going to, DMV I think, to provide some training on how to do that. But it's very similar to the process of an officer issuing a notice of driver's license action, right? If you want to take someone's driver's license away, it's a similar form. So basically we issue it to the AV, we leave a copy in there, the AV then will have requirements to notify the DMV, hey, we received this notice of noncompliance. The law enforcement agency will send that same form into the DMV. The DMV then probably will bring me along with them. They'll review that case, and then we'll be able to take action on that permit. Whether it's a full, suspension, revocation, maybe there's something in between that they can do to try to create and change that behavior. So we're in the process, the law is in place now for it, so stay tuned to see that form come out.
If I could add to that real quick too, I think there's a misconception that these AV companies are not open and welcome to the feedback and the information, and that is so far from it. I think these AV companies, all of our members of AVSC, welcome the feedback. They want to hear if they hear something going on because they immediately are going to address it. And I think it's so key that the collaboration you mentioned earlier, right? That's the whole purpose of us all talking to each other, because through that collaboration, we'll hear that and our companies can address it and hopefully fix it. As Matt said earlier, Mr. Holmes, that, it's fixed. The things he saw a year ago, he's not seeing now, right? Because they are trying to keep that feedback loop going and correct the issues. So.
Thank you. In the back, then I'll get
Question for Ms. Foldenauer. Is SAE or your organization looking at standardization for those manual overrides? I know that Waymo has some options for that, and how you can an officer can interact and ultimately maybe be able to move a vehicle that has limited connectivity with home base, so to speak. And as more companies come on board, do you expect an officer to know, okay, which brand of automated vehicle is this, and what are the procedures for this brand?
So it's a good question. So the SAE document that we're putting together is right now just focused on the interaction response with ADS-DVs. So it's just that framework. But I think to your point, and this goes beyond, I think, just having a best practice. I think further than that, we need a database. I mean, as we've heard already, we have AV companies. All of them are a little bit different. If we have a response, first response interactive plan that each company's following, that's great. But how do you access it? And how they're all going to be a little bit different until we get rules and regulation that can standardize everything. So the first step is let's get the framework there so they start the interaction plan. Drive it to this best practice, and then hopefully regulators will start to see that and start putting some regulation in place. But we've been at different summits, and we've heard a lot of people talk about that, and I truly believe, this is my personal opinion, that we need to have a centralized database. Someplace where our first responders, whether they are law enforcement, tow trucks, could be fire, they need to be able to go and access this information quickly. Time is of essence. I mean, in the matter of minutes, things can change and happen. So we need to make sure it's quick. They have access to it. And so I would be advocating that we have a centralized database. I think it needs to be nationwide. It needs to be something that you don't have to think about what city you're sitting in where these are operating. It could be the new locations that are starting to crop up. I'm from Michigan. We have testing going on in our cities in Ann Arbor. People don't even realize the testing's going on, but it's there. We have Michigan State University has driverless buses on their campus. People don't even realize it's there. They're automated. So it's happening all over, and I think it needs to be something that everybody can access. So to your point, we're starting one step at a time, and the goal is to get us to the point where we can expand on our standards.
Time for one more question here real quick.
Thanks, and a little bit tied to what you just said was, I was wondering if you were maybe even looking to work with NHTSA. They have the National Traffic Incident Management Training, and we had a session here at Lifesavers last year that talked a little bit about it, but I can anticipate like the tow truck workers needing to know how to make sure that the vehicle is what mode it's in, or even 911 call operators needing to know some training. So I was just curious if your organization or any organization is working with NHTSA in some of that training to help get whoever, and like you said, maybe it's not just the few cities, but Michigan and
Nationally.
others
Yeah.
to be aware of these needs.
So absolutely. One of the things that we do, besides trying to get awareness and have these sessions and participate in them, we also meet with NHTSA on a quarterly basis, our organization, so the Automated Vehicle Safety Consortium. We have regular touch points with them. We actually take feedback from them on our best practices as we put them out, and we ask them to tell us where do they see the gaps? What are some of the topics that you think we need to be working on? And we take that feedback and we actively give it to our members, and we work on it and we address it. So I think, not to say that our AV companies are not also meeting with NHTSA, of course they do. They have their own discussions. But when it comes from a consortium which represents several companies, and we can show that it's not just an agenda from one organization or a company, it's what we're trying to do, what's right for everybody, for the industry. I think it does, it opens up the avenue that they talk a little bit more freely to us. So yes, we do have that point.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, I know speaking from an industry perspective, I'm on multiple committees across the nation that are associated with TIM training and those sorts of things, and we do work together to try to, as an industry, to try to standardize some of this information and get it out to everybody that needs it. So, hey, I'm afraid we're at time. I know it's a big topic, and there's probably, if you have additional questions, I'm sure the panel will be happy to hang around and answer your question. Got to get a hand for this fantastic panel, please. All right, thank you everybody for taking the time to be here today. We really appreciate it.